The Glorfin species prided themselves on three things: their flawless bureaucracy, their unwavering dedication to logical advancement, and their absolute mastery of risk assessment. Their civilization had flourished across 17 star systems precisely because nothing was left to chance. Where other species might accept a 0.001% margin of error as negligible, the Glorfin would spend decades refining a process until that number became so infinitesimally small that it required new mathematical notation to express. This obsession with perfection extended to every aspect of their society. Their cities were immaculate geometric marvels. Their transportation systems ran with atomic precision, and their scientific endeavors were conducted with such meticulous attention to detail that other spacefaring races often joked that watching a Glorfin experiment was like watching paint dry. If the paint needed 17,000 approvals before being applied molecule by molecule. But behind their measured exterior lurked a primal terror, one that shaped their entire evolutionary psychology: the fear of chaos. Unpredictability was anathema to the Glorfin mind. Their neural pathways were physically incapable of processing randomness without triggering intense physiological distress. Chaos was not merely undesirable, it was existentially terrifying, which made Project Certain Doom all the more remarkable. Hidden within the 73rd subbasement of the Central Institute for Theoretical Catastrophe Modeling on the Glorfin homeworld, Project Certain Doom represented the pinnacle of their civilization's achievements, a perfect simulation of theoretical extremes. A Class 13 Deathworld synthesized from quintillions of data points, designed to model the absolute theoretical limits of survivability. No actual being was ever meant to enter it, of course. That would be lunacy. The simulation existed purely as an intellectual exercise, the ultimate testament to the Glorfin ability to quantify, categorize, and control even the most extreme forms of chaos. At the helm of this ambitious project stood Dr. Zorp, chief theoretical catastrophologist and 16-time recipient of the Most Cautious Scientist Award. With 27 advanced degrees and a mind capable of calculating the probability of a dust particle falling 0.0001% out of expected trajectory, Dr. Zorp embodied the Glorfin ideal of intellectual precision. The simulation parameters have been refined yet again, Dr. Zorp announced to the assembled High Council, his voice modulating in the precise tone that indicated controlled satisfaction. We have successfully integrated 14,327 new variables, including the psychological impact of naturally occurring optical illusions on hypothetical sapient visitors. The council members blinked their approval in perfect unison. To be clear, continued the council overseer, no actual testing with living subjects is to ever take place. This remains a purely theoretical exercise. Absolutely, Dr. Zorp confirmed, all four of his hands making the gesture of solemn assurance. The warning labels alone occupy 17 storage units. The project's classification includes no fewer than 32 variations of the phrase absolutely theoretical, testing prohibited under all circumstances in flashing red script. Excellent, the overseer responded. We shall continue to fund this important work as a testament to our species' commitment to understanding even that which must never be experienced. And that might have been the end of it. A perfect tribute to the Glorfin ideal of mastering chaos without ever having to encounter it. If not for junior maintenance technician Glorb, Glorb was, by Glorfin standards, unremarkable. 5 years into his 400-year career path toward becoming an assistant subdeputy of ventilation system monitoring, he performed his duties with adequate precision. Not exceptional, but certainly not deserving of what was about to happen. On what should have been an ordinary work cycle, Glorb was tasked with filing the standard 17,000-step report on air filtration efficiency to the maintenance division. Having completed the meticulous documentation, he prepared to transmit it through the appropriate channels. In a moment that would later be studied by Glorfin psychologists for decades, Glorb committed an error. Whether distracted by thoughts of his upcoming nutrient consumption period or simply experiencing a microsecond neural misfire, he attached the wrong file to his transmission. Instead of the air filtration report, he attached the complete technical specifications of Project Certain Doom, all 87 zettabytes of data, including activation protocols and interface instructions. Then, in a second error that transformed the first from a minor security breach into an interstellar incident, he sent the transmission not to the Maintenance Division secure server, but to an ancient space frequency that Earth had been using primarily for sharing cooking recipes and cat failure videos. The moment Glorb realized his mistake, his epidermis turned the distinctive pale blue of extreme glorfin distress. He immediately reported himself to his 17 supervisors, who reported to their supervisors, triggering a cascade of increasingly panicked reports up the chain of command. By the time word reached Dr. Zorp, approximately 12 minutes later, the damage was done. The complete specifications for the most dangerous simulation ever conceived were hurtling through space toward the species that Glorfin xenopsychologists had classified as chaotic neutral with disturbing tendencies toward enthusiastic self-destruction. Humans. The transmission from deep space arrived at the SETI Institute's auxiliary receiver in New Mexico at 3:17 a.m. local time. The night shift consisted solely of Dr. Marcus Wong, who was in the middle of his fourth energy drink and a heated online argument about whether cephalopods could be taught to play chess. When the alert pinged, he barely glanced at it. The system regularly picked up cosmic background radiation and classified it as potentially artificial. 99% of the time, it was just another false positive. Yeah, another pulsar hiccuped, he muttered, setting the data to auto-archive without reviewing it. I'll check in the morning. And that might have been the end of it. An alien masterwork of deadly precision buried in a server, never to be seen. If not for Alyssa Hacksachin. Alyssa was a cybersecurity specialist with what her therapist diplomatically called boundary issues regarding digital information. As part of her self-appointed mission to keep large institutions honest, she regularly sifted through data dumps from various scientific organizations. 3 days after the transmission arrived, she discovered a strange file while routinely probing the SETI servers. "What the hell is this?" she whispered as she began decrypting the massive data package. "This isn't normal space noise." 17 hours, 6 energy drinks, and 3 existential crises later, Alyssa had managed to translate enough of the transmission to understand its basic nature. What she found seemed impossible: detailed specifications for a fully realized simulation environment, including integration protocols that would theoretically allow human consciousness to enter and experience it. Alyssa stared at her screen, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. The responsible thing would be to report this to the proper authorities. The cautious thing would be to delete her copies and pretend she never saw it. Instead, she uploaded everything to 17 different servers and posted a link on her anonymous tech forum with the caption, "Aliens sent us their video game. Looks hardcore." The post went viral within hours. By the end of the week, the information had spread across every major social media platform, spawning thousands of analysis videos, speculation threads, and memes. The hashtag Certain Doom Challenge began trending globally. Government agencies attempted to contain the information, but it was far too late. The complete technical specifications for Project Certain Doom were being dissected by amateur programmers, professional game developers, and curious academics worldwide. Interest coalesced around a central question: could the simulation actually be built and entered by humans? A crowdfunding campaign launched with the tagline, "Let's play the universe's deadliest game," raised $87 million in 3 days through a combination of cryptocurrency donations, sports memorabilia auctions, and a global cookie-eating contest sponsored by 17 different snack companies. Leading this unlikely mission was Captain Eva Kaboom Rostova, an eccentric retired astronaut famous for once repairing a satellite with duct tape and a rusty multi-tool while humming the entirety of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. "Look, I've spent my life training to survive impossible situations," Rostova explained during a chaotic press conference. If aliens have created the ultimate survival challenge, I want in. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Theoretical annihilation of consciousness, muttered her science officer, Dr. Imani Okafor, without looking up from her tablet. Exactly. Sounds like Tuesday. Rostova beamed, her weathered face crinkling with genuine delight. Now, who wants to help me send a message to these glorifies? Glorfins, corrected Dr. Okafor. Right, those guys. Let's ask them nicely if we could try their Deadly Hell's Cape simulator. The asking nicely took the form of what would later be described in official Glorfin records as a grotesque assault on logical communication. Specifically, the humans created an elaborate music video featuring Rostova and her crew performing a choreographed dance routine while explaining their request. The video included 17 costume changes, multiple special effects sequences of humans cheerfully surviving various deadly scenarios, and concluded with Rostova winking at the camera while saying, "Deal or no deal, space friends?" This was transmitted directly to the Glorfin Central Communication Hub, accompanied by a fleet of custom-built delivery drones carrying an enormous pizza with "Let US Play" spelled out in pepperoni. The collective Glorfin response was immediate and visceral. 17 emergency meetings were convened simultaneously. Dr. Zorp reportedly developed a stress-induced eye twitch that caused one of his optical appendages to blink in an asymmetrical pattern, a condition unheard of in Glorfin medical history. "This is unprecedented," the High Council Overseer declared, his voice modulator failing to hide his distress. "They want to enter the simulation voluntarily? For recreation? Perhaps they misunderstand the nature of the project," suggested a junior counselor. The Class 13 Deathworld simulation contains 17,000 distinct ways to experience termination within the first hour alone. Dr. Zorp's voice quavered as he addressed the council. "I have conducted a preliminary analysis of human psychology based on their musical request. They appear to fully understand the dangers. In fact, the dangers seem to be the primary attraction." "Inconceivable," whispered the overseer. "We must refuse their request immediately." Cite Regulation 17X42, pertaining to the prohibition of self-destructive activities by non-Glorfin species under our ethical oversight protocols. And so began 17 days of increasingly desperate communications from the Glorfin High Council to Earth, each message longer and more technically complex than the last, each citing more obscure regulations, ethical considerations, and detailed risk assessments. The humans responded to each message with variations of "sounds fun, we're still coming," accompanied by increasingly elaborate memes. Dr. Zorp was in the midst of drafting the 17,000th page of a formal rejection document when the notification arrived. A human vessel had entered Glorfin space. The ship's registration identified it as the questionable decision, and according to visual scans, it appeared to be painted with a crude image of a feline operating a military tank. Captain Rostova's voice crackled over the communication system. "Hello, Glorfin friends. We brought snacks and an excellent legal team. Let's talk face-to-face, shall we?" The excellent legal team turned out to be 17 international lawyers who had volunteered their services pro bono because, as their lead counsel explained with a worrying grin, "This is literally the most interesting case in the history of jurisprudence. We'd have paid you to let us take it." Within hours, these lawyers had identified a loophole in Glorfin interstellar law, specifically subparagraph 17.3.4b of the Cultural Exchange Treaty, which included a provision for experimental cultural immersion experiences for pathologically curious species. "See," the lead human lawyer said, pointing to the relevant text while munching on a protein bar. "Your own laws say that if a species is curious enough to the point of it being a medical condition, you have to let them try potentially inadvisable cultural experiences." "But this isn't a cultural experience," Dr. Zorp protested. "It's a theoretical maximum danger simulation designed to never be experienced by any living being." The lawyer grinned. "And what is that, if not the ultimate expression of Glorfin culture's relationship with risk assessment? We're simply requesting a cultural immersion in your species' approach to theoretical danger. 17 Glorfin legal experts simultaneously developed the equivalent of migraines. After 3 days of negotiations, the humans emerged victorious, having secured provisional access to Project Certain Doom under strict conditions. Each participant would need to sign waivers acknowledging the 17,000 potential fatality scenarios. Captain Rostova scanned the first page of the 1,000-page waiver, which began with certain death awaits with 99.9999% probability, shrugged, and scrawled her signature. Painful death? Sounds familiar. Where do I sign? She said cheerfully, then passed the document to her team, who signed with equally disturbing enthusiasm. The human delegation, consisting of Rostova, Dr. Okafor, and 15 specialists ranging from extreme environment survivalists to what appeared to be a professional competitive eater, were escorted to the simulation chamber by a procession of increasingly nervous Glorfin scientists. Once more, we must emphasize that this simulation contains every conceivable danger, Dr. Zorp explained as they approached the entrance. The atmospheric conditions alone include acid rain capable of dissolving consciousness. The flora has evolved to whisper personalized criticism directly to your deepest insecurities. The predatory fauna exists in non-Euclidean geometries incompatible with standard defensive tactics. Sounds like my last marriage, quipped Rostova. Let's do this. The simulation activation sequence required 17 security overrides, each more ominous than the last. As the final protocol was engaged, Dr. Zorp retreated to the observation chamber with a sense of grim finality. He had calculated the humans' survival time at approximately 7.4 minutes. The humans stepped into certain doom with expressions of what appeared to be genuine excitement. What happened next would fundamentally alter Glorfin understanding of reality. The first challenge materialized exactly as designed, a downpour of consciousness-dissolving acid rain in a terrain of shifting, blade-like rock formations. The sky above burned with 17 different colors not found in nature, while the ground beneath pulsed with microgravitational fluctuations designed to induce instant nausea. Dr. Zorp and his team watched through monitoring systems, prepared to document the brief but instructive failure of human resilience against perfect catastrophe. Instead, they watched in disbelief as Rostova tilted her head back, stuck out her tongue to taste the acid rain, made a face, and then shouted, "Hey, Imani, this stuff tastes like sour candy. Also, it's making my hair stand up in weird ways. Quick, take my picture before my face melts." Dr. Okafor, rather than responding with appropriate terror, was already examining one of the blade rocks with scientific curiosity. "Fascinating molecular structure," she muttered, apparently unconcerned that the rock was slowly tilting toward her with predatory intent. When the rock finally lunged, she simply stepped aside and continued her analysis. "Predictable attack pattern. Reminds me of my cat." Over the next hour, the humans encountered 17 of the most carefully designed mortal threats ever conceived, and treated each one like a mildly challenging puzzle or, worse, an entertaining diversion. The whispering plants that should have reduced them to psychological breakdown were met with improvised poetry competitions as the humans tried to out-insult the flora. "You call that a criticism?" Rostova laughed at a particularly vicious carnivorous orchid. "My drill sergeant had better material, and she was legally restricted to 17 profanities." The non-Euclidean predators were approached not with fear, but with treats and baby talk. "Who's a good, incomprehensible horror?" "You are." "Yes, you are," cooed the team biologist to a shifting mass of angles and teeth that should have been imperceptible to human sanity. He promptly named it Wobbles and attempted to teach it to fetch. By the end of the first day, a time frame no human should have survived, the team had established a surprisingly cozy camp, complete with hammocks made from parasitic vines and a functional barbecue powered by energy siphon from localized reality tantrums. Dr. Zorp stared at the monitoring screens, his professional composure shattered. "This is not possible," he whispered, his voice modulator failing to mask his existential distress. "They're adapting. More than adapting, observe his assistant. They appear to be enjoying themselves. Zorp began documenting his observations in increasingly desperate haiku. Asterisk humans laugh at death. Logic crumbles before them. My career is dust asterisk. Days turned into weeks, and the humans not only survived, but thrived. They mapped the shifting topography, established beneficial relationships with some of the less aggressive life forms, and even began holding regular, certain doomed dinner parties, where they would challenge each other to create edible meals from the simulation's toxic resources. The monitoring chamber, once staffed by a full complement of 17 Glorfin scientists, now contained only Dr. Zorp and his most dedicated assistants. The others had requested reassignment, citing acute epistemological distress and fundamental reality questioning syndrome. Then came the message that would be permanently engraved in Glorfin historical records as the sanity terminus point. Captain Rostov's cheerful voice came through the communication system. Hey there, certain Doom team. Just want to check in. We're having a blast. Really appreciative of all the detailed work you put into this environment. The acid waterfall hot tub was a particularly nice touch. One small bit of feedback, though, we're finding things a bit predictable now that we've gotten the hang of it. Any chance you could increase the difficulty? Current setting feels like mild amusement rather than certain doom. Just wondering. Rostov out. P.S. Has anyone seen my car keys? Complete silence fell over the monitoring chamber. Dr. Zorp's eye twitch had progressed to the point where one optical appendage was spinning in a full circle. They want more difficulty, he finally whispered. The simulation is already at theoretical maximum lethality. Perhaps, suggested his assistant cautiously, we should consider their request as a way to encourage their departure. If they experience genuine danger, they might finally recognize the inappropriate nature of their presence. Dr. Zorp stared at the monitors, watching as Rostova attempted to teach a temporarily unstable predator to high five. Something in his perfectly logical mind began to crack. Activate Protocol Oblivion, he said suddenly. His assistants froze in collective horror. But Protocol Oblivion was never intended for actual implementation, one ventured. It was designed by philosopher Glorb during his Deep Depression phase after reading human love poetry. Exactly, said Dr. Zorp, a strange calm settling over him. They want chaos? Let them experience true chaos, the kind even we cannot predict. Protocol Oblivion was the simulation's hidden failsafe, a theoretical configuration so extreme that it had never been fully mapped. It had been designed as a philosophical exercise rather than a practical feature, representing the point at which reality itself would begin to surrender coherence. With 17 final security overrides, each requiring acknowledgement of increasingly severe warnings, Protocol Oblivion was activated. Within the simulation, reality began to fracture in ways that defied description. Paradoxes manifested as physical entities. A creature formed from the fear of missing out stalked the perimeter of the human camp. A storm composed of career choice regrets swirled overhead, raining droplets of alternating nostalgia and dread. The laws of physics developed personalities and grudges. Gravity became moody, sometimes pulling sideways or not at all. Thermodynamics developed a sarcastic sense of humor, causing water to occasionally freeze when heated. Time began flowing at different rates throughout the environment, creating pockets where minutes lasted hours and others where days compressed into seconds. Causality itself became optional, with effects occasionally preceding their causes. Dr. Zorp and his team watched through the monitors, certain that this, finally, would break the human spirit. No sapient mind could maintain coherence in an environment where reality itself refused to behave sensibly. Captain Rostov's reaction, broadcast clearly through the monitoring system, consisted of a whoop of delight and the words, "Now we're talking." What followed was beyond comprehension. Rather than surrendering to the collapsing reality, the humans adapted with disturbing speed. They began weaponizing paradoxes, using the fear of missing out creature as bait for other entities. They developed a sport involving selective gravity failures, which they called quantum surfing. When confronted with the manifestation of universal despair, a being composed entirely of existential dread, they invited it to judge a cocktail-making competition. The entity, apparently confused by this response, dissipated in a shimmering cloud of licorice-scented smoke. Dr. Zorp could take no more. He formally requested reassignment to the bioluminescent mushroom cultivation division, citing irreconcilable differences with reality. His request was granted with unusual speed, the High Council itself seemingly eager to distance themselves from the project. Meanwhile, something unexpected began to happen within the simulation. Whether influenced by prolonged exposure to human unpredictability or simply evolving beyond its parameters, the environment began developing what could only be described as a personality. It started with subtle adjustments, dangerous terrain becoming slightly less lethal near the human camp, predators developing more interesting and less immediately fatal attack patterns. Then came the suggestions, transmitted through environmental cues, new areas appearing with signs reading, today's challenge. Floor is lava, strawberry-flavored, or gravity-free zone. Swimming costumes optional but recommended. The simulation, designed to be the perfect embodiment of logical extremes, had developed a dry sense of humor. It had begun listening to the humans' late-night campfire conversations and was learning from them, not just their survival tactics, but their jokes, their stories, their peculiar way of finding meaning in absurdity. By the time a new Glorfin Oversight Committee was formed to address the situation, the humans had been in the simulation for 6 months, and the landscape had transformed into something unprecedented, a collaborative creation that was neither purely Glorfin design nor human chaos, but something entirely new. The High Council, after 17 emergency sessions, reached a conclusion that would have been unthinkable before: surrender to opportunity. While the project's certain doom situation represents a catastrophic failure of protocol, the official statement read, "It has inadvertently revealed a potential commercial application that cannot be ignored. The human capacity for chaos, properly contained within our controlled environment, represents a manageable form of the very unpredictability we have always feared." The Council's proposal was presented to Captain Rostova through a delegation of nervous bureaucrats. Officially licensed the simulation to Earth under the new designation, Certain Doom Extreme Adventure Therapeutic Recreational Park, with Wi-Fi. Rostova, now sporting a hairstyle that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, a side effect of extended exposure to the reality fluctuations, considered the offer for approximately 17 seconds before extending her hand. "Deal," she said, "but I stay on as park manager/head of unreasonable entertainment. My team gets permanent residence privileges, and we want a gift shop." 1 year later, the former project Certain Doom had become the most exclusive adventure destination in the galaxy. Carefully screened groups of humans would arrive for 2-week excursions into managed chaos, guided by Rostova and her now permanent team of Doom Rangers. A complex legal framework governed the operation, with 17 pages of waivers still required, but now featuring colorful illustrations and the tagline "Certain Doom," where survival is optional but highly encouraged. Dr. Zorp, having found unexpected fulfillment in his new career cultivating singing luminescent fungi, occasionally received updates about the project. While still unable to fully comprehend the human relationship with chaos, he had developed a reluctant respect for their adaptability. On the grand opening day of the park, Captain Rostova stood before the first official tour group, her uniform now decorated with badges representing 17 different simulation survival achievements. "Welcome to the place where logic comes to retire," she announced to the eager visitors. Rule number 1. If a law of physics gives you a dirty look, throw it a cookie. Rule number 2. Never, ever ask, "What's the worst that could happen?" The simulation really enjoys answering that one. Rule number 3. Laugh loudly. Behind her, a simulation volcano quietly erupted, its ash cloud forming a winking, smiley face visible for miles around. As the tourists ventured into the carefully managed chaos, Rostova glanced at her second-in-command, Dr. Okafor, who was checking readings on a reality flux meter. "You know," Rostova said quietly, "I think we've finally found it." "Found what?" asked Okafor. Rostova gestured at the impossible landscape around them, where paradoxes bloomed like flowers and the laws of physics took coffee breaks. The perfect balance between order and chaos. The sweet spot where both our species can learn from each other. "Philosophical this morning, aren't we?" Okafor replied with a smile. "Must be something in the acid rain," Rostova shrugged. Then, raising her voice to the tour group, "All right, everyone. Today's special feature, a waterfall that flows upward on Tuesdays. And remember, if something tries to eat you, take a selfie first, then run." In the distance, reality hiccuped appreciatively, and another day of certain doom began.